You treated her with more genuine care than any guy she'd ever known. You truly heard her out. You were there when it mattered. You focused on her completely. You avoided all the mind games. You stayed consistent, never vanishing without a trace. You didn't leave her in constant doubt. For a brief time, everything clicked perfectly. But then a subtle change occurred. Her messages became briefer. Her affection grew fainter. Her passion slipped away softly, without any confrontation. The most baffling aspect, you remained the same. You didn't slip up. You didn't diminish in worth. What you truly forfeited was far riskier. You created a sense of emotional security for her. Not just protection or respect, but pure safety. And that's the harsh reality few men ever hear, as it comes across as brutal. It feels unjust. It slices right through all the lessons you've absorbed about romance. Today, I'll reveal an aspect of women's psychology that hardly any woman will voice openly. This isn't about criticizing women, it's about unraveling their inner workings. We're not discussing deceit, peace, or feigning indifference. It's all about grasping the flow of emotions and why spark diminishes the instant a man relinquishes his role as emotional guide. If you've ever been abandoned, supplanted, or gradually sidelined despite doing all the right things, this discussion is tailored for you. Before why emotional security kills desire, the harsh reality. Diving deeper, pause to hit that like button on this video and subscribe. Not just for fun, but as a pledge to grasp how desire really operates, not the fairy tale version you hope for. From a young age, you were instilled with a certain ideal, and it seemed honorable. Treat her kindly, and she'll reciprocate with love. Stay reliable. Show compassion. Be open with your feelings. If she senses enough security, she'll commit. That notion didn't stem from real-life trials. It arose from films, relationship advice pieces, and kind-hearted folks who mixed up ethics with allure. Here's the awkward fact. Simply being decent doesn't spark attraction. Being emotionally anchored does. The majority of men don't lose partners due to being rude, neglectful, or harsh. They lose them by gradually surrendering their emotional stance. There's a nuance here that almost nobody breaks down for you. Generosity rooted in power feels reassuring. Generosity born from anxiety feels burdensome. When your affection stems from a craving to be selected, validated, or comforted, it ceases to seem selfless. It begins to appear like a trade-off. Even without voicing it, the underlying vibe seeps through your voice, your pace, your stance, your aura. You believe you're conveying, "I value you." But what she perceives is, "I require your approval." That transition is understated yet lethal. Emotional guidance involves offering without eroding your core. It means your focus is extended, not yielded entirely. It signifies you don't crumble your personal realm based on her feedback. Most guys overlook the exact instant this occurs. They simply notice her withdrawing. She's still courteous, still friendly, still tender enough to bewilder you. But the craving, the intensity, the intrigue, it's vanished. And this is where men err. They presume she departed because they fell short, weren't compassionate enough, more tolerant, more lavish. No, women don't abandon men for being overly kind. They leave when a man forfeits his emotional pull, when she no longer senses she's hidden female psychology, what women won't say out loud, elevating to align with you. When she feels like you're subtly orbiting her, awaiting selection. Desire doesn't perish amid turmoil. It withers in emotional capitulation. That's the deception you were never cautioned against. Once you recognize it, it's impossible to ignore. Most men encounter the term hypergamy and instantly associate it with finances, appearance, or social standing. They envision riches, stature, clout, outer attributes they think dictate all. That misinterpretation keeps them stuck. Hypergamy isn't tied to your possessions. It's linked to your emotional placement. Allure isn't gauged by your finances. It's assessed by trajectory. Who is admiring whom? When a woman perceives herself as emotionally superior to you, when she detects you're more committed, more bonded, more terrified of loss, an inner switch flips, not deliberately, but reflexively. Because longing doesn't ascend, it gravitates toward what's slightly elusive. This explains why two men with comparable circumstances evoke utterly distinct responses. One seems irresistible, the other unnoticeable. The variance isn't assets, it's emotional alignment. A woman doesn't require feeling lesser to desire you, but she must sense that your absence is conceivable. That understated strain. I could lose him isn't harmful insecurity, it's mental momentum. It maintains her invested, attentive, inquisitive. When generosity from strength versus neediness, the key difference that strain evaporates, desire levels out. Total assurance feels soothing. Sure, but it also feels conclusive, and longing doesn't thrive in conclusions. This is where men mix up steadiness with allure. They think reliability by itself merits devotion, but reliability minus emotional guidance comes off as accessibility without substance. When she knows unequivocally you'll remain, you'll adjust. You'll favor her emotional ease over your own foundation. She ceases aspiring toward you, not from malice, not from ingratitude, but because the emotional flow inverted. Hypergamy reacts to how things appear, not your aims. It responds to who seems to be selecting and who seems to be lingering. This is why a man can execute everything flawlessly and still sense her drifting. He didn't forfeit worth, he forfeited advantage. And here's the segment. Men bulk at absorbing. A woman doesn't wish to feel superior to the man she craves. She yearns to feel propelled upward emotionally, vibrantly, mentally. The second she senses she's already peaked, the adventure concludes, and desire subtly trails behind. Longing doesn't vanish in a flashy instant. It diminishes gradually, silently, nearly courteously. It commences when a man turns utterly foreseeable, not in personality but in sentiment. She anticipates your response. She expects your presence. She knows your emotions before you utter them. That predictability feels cozy. But coziness isn't what sustains longing. Allure demands strain. Not mayhem, not volatility, but mental flux. The notion that something remains evolving. When how emotional leadership keeps the spark alive. You grow emotionally steady in a manner that erases all doubt. The bond ceases to pulsate. There's no more to gravitate toward, no more to uncover. From her viewpoint, the narrative is complete. This is where many men misread what women imply by the spark is gone. They assume it's about thrill, freshness, or exertion. It's not. It's about emotional resistance. When a man's aura becomes assured, when his focus becomes expected, when his feelings pivot around her cues, longing starts to mellow, not for any misstep on his part, but because he ceased maintaining strain. Picture two men. One is perpetually available, emotionally open, flexible, eager to comfort. The other offers kindness, but also purpose. A existence that doesn't warp to her whims, a core that remains solid regardless of her advance or retreat. Both demonstrate concern. Only one feels stabilizing and captivating. Security is soothing. It fosters trust. It breeds tranquility. But it doesn't breed yearning. Yearning emerges from the delicate impression that your company is selected, not obligatory, that your focus is deliberate, not reflexive. This is why emotional shitty extinguishes longing without intent. The man believes he's forging bonds. She senses the bond halted in motion. And once longing halts, no volume of comfort can reignite it because longing ignores reason. It reacts to emotional contrast. You don't forfeit allure by being steady. You forfeit it by turning emotionally stagnant. And the sorrow is this. Most men only comprehend the shift after she's already withdrawn. Not furious, not theatrical, just no longer hypergamy explained. It's emotional, not financial, extending herself. Most men hear interest tests and instantly bristle. They feel scrutinized, assessed, rated. That's not the case. She's not gauging your smarts. She's not evaluating your skills. She's not even probing your self-assurance as you might imagine. She's subtly and persistently assessing one element. How emotionally committed are you to me? Every exchange reveals that to her, whether you're aware or not. Who initiates contact? Who seeks comfort? Who advances during quiet spells? These instances seem minor, innocuous, routine, but emotionally, they indicate stance. When you start every dialogue, she doesn't register enthusiasm. She registers readiness. When you hasten to ease her dispositions, she doesn't feel bolstered. She feels pivotal. When you're consistently the one pursuing intimacy, contact, affirmation, emotional updates, she doesn't feel wanted. She feels chased, and being chased thrills momentarily, but eventually it dissipates strain. Without strain, allure lacks anchorage. Here's the facet men seldom grasp. You don't stumble in these instances due to the deed alone. You stumble from the emotional thrust propelling it. Two men can dispatch identical texts. One feels balanced, the other desperate. Two men can extend identical tenderness. One feels selective, the other remedial. She doesn't deliberate this rationally. She senses it. That's why attempting to clever your way past these instances fails. You can't act through emotional disequilibrium. Interest tests aren't snares. They're emotional reflections. They mirror who's advancing, who's firm, and who's anticipating desire. And when she detects your emotional condition hinges on her replies, an inner alteration occurs, not from a thirst for control, but because allure demands contrast. She must sense your foundation persists apart from her endorsement. When you ignore the lure, when you don't scramble to seal every void, occupy every hush, or pacify every doubt, you're not depriving. You're maintaining stance. And that stance fosters longing. Most men believe navigating these instances requires amplifying efforts. When she feels superior, the switch that ends attraction. Actually, it involves yielding less. It's not about aloofness. It's about wholeness. Because the instant she feels she wields emotional sway over you, she ceases feeling magnetized to you. And that's the evaluation she's conducted throughout. This is where men feel most deceived. As from your angle, you didn't alter. You didn't cease valuing her. You didn't turn indifferent or egotistical. You followed instinct. You advanced. You inquired after her. You provided comfort, warmth, steadfastness. And oddly, that's when her allure began waning. Here's the contradiction most men overlook. Identical caring acts can convey power or frailty, hinging wholly on emotional alignment. It's not the gesture, it's the bearing beneath it. When a man with emotional weight expresses care, it feels purposeful, elective, rooted. When a man lacking that weight expresses care, it feels compensatory through her emotional filter. Those are vastly different realms. This is where scarcity contrasts surplus. A man with emotional abundance doesn't bestow to lock in approval. He bestows because he's capable. A man sensing emotional dearth bestows to fortify the link, avert departure, preserve the tie. She detects that disparity immediately, not as critique, but as intuition. That's why caring often gets misconstrued as clinginess, even with pure motives, because emotionally she doesn't feel upheld. She feels accountable, and accountability weighs heavy. Let me illustrate this in action. Two men clasp her hand on the sofa. One is at ease, engaged, autonomous. His existence doesn't pivot predictability versus tension. Why comfort kills. Longing on this. The other is inclining, observing her response, requiring the proximity for security. Same act, entirely divergent emotional load. She doesn't label him clingy. She just senses misalignment. And once that sensation emerges, her allure recalibrates as longing can't align with emotional disparity. This is why men are bewildered upon hearing, "You're wonderful. I just don't sense it now." They think exertion was the remedy. More compassion, more attendance, more solace. But exertion, sans emotional abundance, registers as coercion. Coercion doesn't generate allure, it erodes it. Here's the reality most men defy. Care merely magnifies the existing foundation. If you retain emotional alignment, Care intensifies longing. If you've lost it, care hastens the erosion. It's not your actions, it's your emotional essence during them. And until that evolves, no degree of benevolence will salvage the bond. When physical intimacy begins waning, most men internalize it. They view it as a statement, a rebuke, a strategy. It's none of those. Withholding sex isn't retribution, it's an indicator, and men's error is bargaining with instinct via rationale. From her end, no major shift transpired, no deliberate choice, no scheme to deny. What altered was innate. Allure declined, and her physiology reacted before her thoughts could rationalize. When craving lessens, openness contracts, not from resentment, but from reflex. This is where men ensnare themselves in faulty thinking. They ponder. If I convey my depth of care, she'll regain security. If I display more tenderness, she'll return. If I comfort her, normally will resume. But comfort doesn't revive allure. It affirms the emotional misalignment that triggered it. Because when a woman perceives a man pursuing intimacy to anchor himself, her system interprets it as discord. Something's amiss, something's oppressive, and her instincts respond accordingly. It closes off, not from cruelty, not from scheming, not from relishing dominance, but because allure can't thrive alongside emotional imbalance. This is the toughest pill for men to swallow. The more you implore for intimacy, the more you signal necessity. The more you signal necessity, the less longing shit tests. What she's really testing, emotional commitment, endures. So men escalate. They strive more, they grow gentler, more vigilant, more accessible, and the chasm widens. As from her emotional standpoint, restoration isn't occurring. The contrast is crumbling more. This explains why physical closeness often fades quietly. Son's disputes, son's explicit reasons. She might still value you. She might still enjoy your company, but her body no longer reacts. And she frequently can't pinpoint why. She simply knows she doesn't wish to yield. Similarly, here's the insight that transforms all. You don't mend intimacy withdrawal by chasing intimacy. You mend it by reclaiming emotional guidance. That entails rediscovering your foundation, your autonomy, your path. Not retreating to penalize, not turning icy or remote, but reclaiming your essence rather than inclining toward hers. Allure doesn't revive via convincing. It revives when emotional equilibrium returns. And until then, each effort to narrow the divide only expands it. This isn't about fault, it's about decoding the cue before it solidifies. The men who grapple hardest with this are seldom reckless or self-centered. They're accountable, reflective, emotionally attuned. They're the ones taught to appear holy and complied. They heed, they aid, they accommodate her emotions, and gradually, unwittingly, they cede their emotional terrain. The flaw isn't benevolence, it's sequence and placement. Decent men often extend emotionally prematurely. Before allure solidifies, before contrast forms, before she's needed to extend from his view, he's constructing ties. From hers, something's awry. She feels uplifted rather than attracted, focal rather than directed. What started as tenderness begins feeling like pull, dragging inward to her. And when a woman senses she's the emotional epicenter of a man's realm, allure doesn't intensify, it implodes. Not because she resents being prized, but because longing demands distinction. Decent men frequently conflate emotional transparency with emotional guidance. They think vulnerability equals full care, from abundance versus scarcity. Why it feels different disclosure. But guidance isn't revealing all. It's maintaining stability amid openness. When your emotional condition orbits her dispositions, when your assurance fluctuates with her feedback, you inadvertently elevate her. She doesn't feel selected, she feels liable. And liability isn't alluring. This is why decent men are often caught off guard. They hear, "You did nothing amiss," and it's accurate. They hear, "You're a fantastic person," and it's genuine. But what remains unsaid is the subtle verity. I no longer feel magnetized to you. Because allure doesn't heed virtue solo, it heeds presence with purpose. Here's the stark truth most men must confront. No woman admires a man who positions her as his emotional cosmos's core, not from desiring supremacy, but because she craves equivalence, not oversight. When you fold your inner realm around her, she forfeits the notion of solidity to incline toward, and once that's lost, no measure of concern can reinstate equilibrium. The men who suffer greatest are those with purest intents, as they never grasped what they sacrificed along the way. This is where it all converges. Most men assume the fix is growing chillier, more detached, less communicative. That's not emotional guidance, that's evasion. Emotional intimacy. Fading. The instinctive reason, not punishment. Guidance isn't unavailability, it's self-sufficiency. An emotionally autonomous man can be affectionate without disintegrating, engaged without lingering, intrigued without yielding his core. He doesn't vanish to fabricate worth. He possesses it inherently as his existence. Selfhood and trajectory don't rely on selection. This is the subtlety few impart. Being present means you can arrive. Being reachable constantly means no limits. And limits aren't barriers, they're framework. A man with emotional guidance has cadence. He has precedences predating her and enduring post her. That doesn't render him frigid, it renders him rooted. From her angle, that rooting sparks allure. She doesn't feel hunted. She doesn't feel accountable. She feels guided. There's something to incline toward. This is why emotionally autonomous men needn't orchestrate longing. They need no tactics or acts. Their aura handles it. They don't over-clarify. They don't overextend. They don't hasten to seal every emotional rift, not from apathy, but from self-rust. And that trust resonates. This is the pivot that alters all. When you cease requiring selection, you halt broadcasting dread of loss. When you halt broadcasting dread of loss, allure gains space to flourish. She no longer feels superior, she feels attracted to you, not from deprivation, not from role-playing, but from your completeness. This is the line between emotional presence and emotional guidance. One seeds the core, the other reclaiming emotional leadership. The real fix retains it while permitting ties. And when a man retains his core, something understated yet potent transpires. He becomes the selected one. Sun's solicitation. At the heart of all you've absorbed lies a verity most men evade for years. Women don't enamored with men who render them emotionally whole. They enamored with men who inspire elevation, not via coercion, not via terror, but via emotional alignment. Allure isn't upheld by comfort, it's upheld by purpose. When you relinquish your emotional core, when your disposition, assurance, and identity hinge on her reactions, you don't grow safer. You shrink in the interplay, and the instant you forfeit emotional weight, another inevitably displaces you. This isn't play, it isn't viciousness, it isn't scheming, it's innate psychology. You needn't grow colder, you needn't grow distant, you needn't deprive care, you must cease forsaking yourself. As the gravest peril in bonds is yielding emotional guidance and expecting affection to compensate, it won't. If you don't command your emotional stance, another will occupy the void you left silently, effectively Sun's request. This distinguishes men who linger in memory from those gradually eclipsed. If this dialogue resonates deeply, subscribe to this channel, not flippantly, but deliberately as a decision to halt recycling emotional cycles and commence comprehending the forces truly steering allure. Drop a comment if you've endured this. If you sensed the alteration but couldn't articulate it, state it directly. No justifications, no narratives. And if you know a man loving incorrectly, forward this to him. Certain insights sting less when acquired,